Welcome to the Freestylers universe. I have an incredible episode for you, an action-packed, advanced curriculum soul here. Will I am Stevens.
What's going on, y'all? I'm happy to be here.
You, brother, have a very potent signature frequency.
When you say the word potent, what comes up for you?
Clear, coherent. There's a depth, there's a chasm that exists, this well of personal life experience. To me, it feels like both this physical lifetime and many, 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 many others.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. You know, I definitely have not always been this way, and this is definitely the highest iteration or evolution of my character. And really, I mean, a lot of my life, most people would have said that I was the opposite due to a lot of things that I was dealing with at the time.
Would you like to expand on that?
Absolutely, brother. So, as many people, I grew up in a childhood that was filled with people that lacked self-love. And with that being said, a lot of people don't actually have a genuine, authentic, true definition of self-love in their essence, from my perspective. A lot of self-love is touted as being shopping or self-care in the sense of like taking care of your body at a nail salon or getting your hair done, which are great things. And they do have their place in self-care. However, what I've come to learn is the deepest level of self-love is a full, authentic expression, regardless of how the external world responds to that authentic expression. And due to growing up in a culture where we are shut down, bastardized, and formed into these cogs in the machine of superficiality and people pleasing for this greater thing that none of us really have any grasp on, we are completely disillusioned from what self-love actually is. So self-love is the full authentic expression without shame and complete love for all the triggers that you experience and others experience along that journey.
Mic drop. Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview.
And with that being said, you know, I hated myself for a while, and that's the only way I think any of us can get to clarity of what self-love is.
Why did you hate yourself?
Why did I hate myself? The main reason that I hated myself is because I was programmed into being somebody that I wasn't for the satisfaction and pleasing of other people that didn't actually care about me and weren't being authentic and expressing their desires to begin with. So it's this doubly deep illusion that many of us run through of expressing ourselves in a way to please somebody else's perspective. But that perspective to begin with usually isn't authentic from them. So it's this whole mishmash of inauthenticity, which just breeds infinitely more of it.
Wow. How did you first recognize that inauthenticity in yourself?
No, I'd say it's a few things. It's hooking up with women and them not being a full fuck yes for my body. They may have been super sexually attractive to me and to the external world of other men in my life, like, oh my God, she's gorgeous, and all these labels that they would put on it. And I would walk away from those experiences feeling as if I lost something from myself regardless of how good the sex was or the emotional intimacy or how well I led the interaction with the woman, I felt like I was losing pieces of myself along that journey. And
Wow.
early on in my dating life, I would act in a way to get acceptance and validation from women being inauthentically masculine, right? So I knew these different concepts of leading women and everything, but I was essentially lying about who I was as a person. And that started with my age, hooking up with women in their mid 20s when I was 15, 16, 17, and telling them I was 22 or 23 because I had a full beard and could pull it off. And my emotional maturity, whether it was due to my trauma or who I am as a character or my soul or a combination of all of it, was deceiving enough at the time to get them to fully commit to that. Like, wow, this man is who he says he is and all these things. And I realized that although that was a piece of who I was, the intensity of character and how I wanted to show up in the world, it wasn't coherent with who I was every day and how I was integrating myself into reality.
Wow. This is right into the deep end.
Diving all the way.
That's right. That's right. Interesting. So, sounds like as you learned some like tactics or skills, right? You're then practicing those out of a desire to experience something that was promised, right? A depth of
Yes.
connection, intimacy, relating, love,
Mm-hmm.
capital L
Yes.
love, shall I say, not
Boom.
lowercase l.
Unconditional.
Yeah. And so then you experienced and explored some of those states, and that felt really inauthentic. And so
Absolutely.
how did you pivot? Because I mean, many people don't, because that could be satiating of the carnal desires.
Mm. The biggest thing, Tyler, would be addressing my relationship with my mother through a non-bullshit way.
Hmm.
And essentially discovering that through my mother's extensive trauma in her life, in her childhood especially, she developed a hidden hatred for men that was disguised as something that was completely justified. And this is the majority of men, the 99% of them. And I got to a point in my life when I was about 13 where my mother completely shifted in how she behaved towards me, as if I was no longer her son, and as if I was something to be discarded, and I was no different than other men, and verbally
This is at
spoken to that
14, you
way as
said?
well. Mm-hmm. 13, 14, in that range, when I really started to go full force into puberty. And I did start puberty earlier than almost anybody else when I was going in school. At about fourth grade was when it first started. So my body was changing fast. Mm-hmm. So, that emergence of masculine energy in my body was much faster than most children, which I'm sure took my mom off guard, especially at the place she was at in her own healing journey. So, through realizing that it was never my mother's intention to treat me in that way, as if I was something to be hated and discarded, and I was just naturally something that was terrible for the world, I began to grow empathy for my mother and realized that she was a woman that always deserved healthy masculine leadership that didn't fucking get it. And
Mm.
she has always been deserving of it. And my philosophy in this masculine, feminine reality that we live in is that men need to lead. And I respect you based on any opinions you have. Even if I hate what you say, I will die for your right to say it. As long as you're a man that will protect the ones that he loves and stand up and put himself on the line for them and expresses himself authentically while leading himself in the world, I got all the respect and love for you in the world. I love your questions, brother. They're bringing my mind to a different place than I've gone to before, so I appreciate that.
Well, this is all co-creative. You inspire the questions. They flow through intuitively, and thank you. It's so interesting how you defined with your mother being deserving of healthy masculine leadership. And there's a lot of talk of toxic masculinity in this world and what that looks like. And I'd love to hear in your own words how you define, healthy masculinity.
So I'd say it would start from addressing what toxic masculinity actually is. And from my perspective, it's seen as emotionally unstable men. So, men that allow their anger more than anything to come out and express itself in damaging ways to the world. And just with that one thing, that, from my perspective, is a feminine trait, because men throughout all of human history have been known as stone, as the mountain, and women as a much more emotional being. So, with that being said, that first main thing is toxic femininity to me, right? So, from my perspective, toxic masculinity can only exist in women, and toxic femininity can only exist in men. So, if we are not embodying what we actually are authentically, then we are by definition going into that toxic femininity or masculinity. And what that may look like for a woman is needing to lead and control every situation in her life because she didn't have a healthy male role model in her childhood, usually a lack of a healthy father figure or her actual father to show her what healthy leadership is, what being protected feels like, what being provided to feels like, and a plethora of other things that a healthy man provides to a daughter and his family.
Wow.
So that's the simplistic way that I approach that. And the lack of emotional control is the most toxically feminine thing in men that gets seen as toxic masculinity. But if we're looking at the sexes from the most objective lens possible, as if we are aliens zooming out, it's okay. This being human, male, is much more consistent in their emotions, much more logical in their approach to the world, and much more solution-based. And this female human is much more emotionally centered and intuitive in how they behave with certain things, which, if gone unled by a healthy masculine, can lead them to getting hurt and emotionally manipulated, and the list goes on. So there is a divine union that I absolutely know is possible and coming into the world as we speak.
How do you define that the divine union feels like it's the divine union within?
Absolutely. So I would say that it's different for each sex, and that for men, it's having a control over their emotions. And for women, it's having a control over their emotions, right? So how those, right? How those two different, right? And I said that intentionally to break it down in this sense. So in a man's control over his emotions, it would be not allowing them to decide what he's going to do in each moment, as in, oh, I don't want to go and do this, or oh, I'm really tired, or whatever that thing might be. Men throughout all of human history have always had to be the ones that are going to get up and do it, even when they don't feel like it, through war, through famine, disease, and get up and go do it. Hunt the animals, defend their family, right, etc. And for women, control their emotions in the sense of becoming deeply in tune with them the same way a man would, right? What am I feeling? What am I, experiencing as a human being? But then learning how to express them in a non-judgmental way and to somebody that is going to be receptive to that energy and reflect them back to them, right? So it's more so women are more social in their control of their emotional states, and the healthiest thing for them would be to control who they share it with, right? To get that honest and authentic reflection. And for men, it would be to control it in the sense of doing what they know they need to do regardless, but not judging or suppressing or damning their emotions, although they're going out and doing something they don't want to do. So it's more so women feeling deeper into what they're experiencing and letting it fully engulf them, and men, the same thing, but going in a different direction of doing what they know is best for them and their family.
Wow. I've not heard it broken down in this frame. I love how you view the world, how you experience these things. So it's an internal emotional journey of understanding for all parties involved, but the expression of that, both in relationship to their partner,
Mm-hmm.
if there's a divine union, or anyone and anything at any time,
Absolutely.
or more accurately, everyone and everything at all times.
Absolutely.
And then with men, or with masculine energy, you're defining it as mode of action. So as I hear you describe that, the feminine is more go internal, know how to not let those emotions feel fully, and then learn how to express those in a way that can actually be fully received, right? And then for the masculine energy, it's to actually take that information from the heart, those emotions, and then know what to do in forms of action and activity. So information of what to do to take action.
Beautifully distilled. It's a transmutation of the emotions, both coming from a state of controlling them first and having a grasp over them, and then the transmutation is completely different.
I'm struggling with the word control there.
So let's say maybe control isn't the exact word I'm reaching for in this context. So what I mean by control in the perspective I have of them is when I'm feeling an emotion, not allowing that emotion to completely drive my entire existence, in the sense of I am always in control of what I'm choosing to think, and thoughts and feelings of the body are always working in a cyclical way. So that may be completely different for a woman's body. And I do know that John Gray has studied when a man sits down, a large portion of his brain that deals with thinking actually slows down and he goes into a more relaxed state. And when women sit down, that same part of their brain actually speeds up. So men and women sitting down, at the end of a day, the woman is going to be more likely to want to share things and be much more expressive just because of the state of her brain, which is where the masculine ability to sit down, relax, and take her emotions in a non-triggered way is going to be extremely beneficial for her actual hormone levels from what he studied, and that it balances her progesterone in a way that's healthy for her body. And birth control, hormonal birth control, something that wildly augments that, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Might be an important rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
Wow. Would you like to double click on any of the information within the blood? Right, you just discussed some hormones, brought up progesterone.
Mm.
We've had some awesome conversations, and your internal landscape understanding has been very helpful for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate that reflection deeply. I'd say the birth control, diving into that, and in the most basic sense, it manipulates your hormones and your pheromones to be attracted to different people and to be attractive to different people as well. So, for example, I was in a relationship and we began the relationship the first 3 months, and she wasn't on hormonal birth control. And it was great. We definitely had a strong chemistry bond, and our dynamic between the masculine and the feminine was powerful, and it was there, and it was healthy. And about a year into her getting a Nexplanon implant in her arm, which is a hormonal birth control that lives inside of you, the energy shift started to take place in a way that was fascinating to me, because I had just begun to really grasp the ability to validate a woman's emotions and help her work through them and release them to drop into a much more feminine and soft state. And I realized that what I was doing wasn't working with her body. And for most of that relationship, the 3 years, I actually turned that inward to myself as if I was doing something wrong. And once the relationship ended, the women that I interacted with immediately following that weren't on birth control, I was able to effortlessly validate their emotions and help them drop into a much more feminine state through the same exact principles and processes I was using in that relationship. On top of that, I actually interacted with her months after she had gotten off the birth control. And when I say she was a different person, it was like I was in another dimension, and she was another sexy woman that I had never interacted with before. It was that powerful of a shift. And she smelled different to me. She looked different to me. Her body felt different to me. And that was all over the course of 3 months of having that Nexplanon taken out of her body. So a fascinating experience, and priceless for my perspective of what's really going on in this world and how little attention we've actually put on studying women's health.
Wow. What about the testosterone side of this equation? What about the main male hormone?
In a male's body, in dynamic with a woman?
Yeah. I'm struggling to even ask the questions in a way that I feel desiring to, to go. You have such a wealth of knowledge and understanding, and the way that you break things down is very coherent. And I'm curious about this whole like internal landscape, because at first, it's around the energetics. Now it's around some of the actual mechanics of what's happening inside the body. And then I'd like to progress into how one can embody, what they define as their truth even more, right? And then even like the transgender kind of conversation. I'd love to get your vantage point, your lens on some of these things.
Beautiful. Okay. So dive into more of the mechanics and then into the transgender aspect of things. So with the testosterone aspect in men, the flip side of listening to a woman, validating her, and helping her drop into that feminine state, when that is successfully done, John Gray has studied that a man's testosterone actually goes up. So,
of course,
progesterone being a testosterone-like substance in a woman's body, when that's dropped, she's much more likely to be turned on and to be aroused just by her man, because that act of him validating her and being in tune with his emotions enough and not insecure in his expression allows her to feel safe being herself and expressing those emotions, which goes back to the sense of controlling who we share those emotions with as a woman, that being one of the largest things, and finding somebody that can safely do that for her. So in that same process of a woman dropping into that state, it's been shown that a man's testosterone goes up. So as her progesterone goes down, his testosterone goes up because he's quote unquote solving a problem,
Ah.
which is her challenging emotions, right? So that's how I usually share it with men when they're confused about how to step into validating a woman when all they want to do is give her solutions. And I say, you are giving her a solution. The solution is listening to her and showing her that all she really needs is to share these things and get a divine, loving reflection from you of everything she's experiencing from a non-triggered and non-attached emotional state yourself, which is grounded, which is stone. And then you end up having wild, amazing, connected tantric sex if you're intentional about cultivating that energy once that woman is validated. And there are other things that go into this equation as well, which would be that same concept of a woman or a man staying strong in who he is and confident enough to hold her emotions and reflect them back to her in a loving way. It also goes into a man saying no to a woman. That's one thing that the majority of men that I work with in my coaching business struggle with. They struggle with the concept of not being liked by women and that they're going to be rejected by women. But a new philosophy that I've come up with is if you are energetically and sexually direct with a woman, it shows that you're not afraid to get kicked out of the tribe because of how much value you bring to that community, right? And that's
Wow.
coming from a place of authenticity. You're not, being, sexually dominant right off the bat when you meet, a woman that you've never met before, but, expressing that this is not a platonic intention that I have with you right off the bat within the first 5 minutes of conversation is going to set the tone. And a lot of the time, if a woman responds, quote unquote, negatively, most men aren't prepared for that because a large majority of men have grown up with either one, single mothers, or two, single mothers in the sense that they had an absent father that was emotionally unavailable and definitely not confident in himself, where the mother tended to take the lead in that parenting process, which puts excess stress on her. So, with all that being said, a man being authentically in tune with himself, knowing his emotions and being able to manage them in a way that doesn't take him away from his mission, if anything, inspires him to take action on his mission. And being able to hold women and really everybody in their emotions and not be triggered by them is going to be the most powerful way that a man can step into a new level of masculinity for himself. And when a woman or somebody rejects you, it has nothing to do with you. It is what they're feeling, what they're processing. It is not an attack on your value as an individual. It's not to say that you don't have things to provide to the world or that attractive women don't desire you. More so, it's either one, she definitely isn't interested, or two, she wants to test your masculinity to see if you're going to get emotional in that state. For example, you go up to a girl, you're interacting, conversation's going great. You say, God, you have got some gorgeous lips and I would love to make out with them sometime, right? And feeling into that, not just saying that in the first 5 seconds, right? And then if she responds negatively, right? You're just calm, cool, and collected. All right, I hear that. I get that, right? But not apologizing because you're not sorry. right? For
Right.
being your authentic self. So there's definitely a lot here, and I appreciate you bringing those things up. And to touch on the transgender aspect, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is that 99% of all the research that I've done into transgenderism and the people that go through those processes, they have extreme trauma that is, I mean, almost unbearable to most human beings in their perspective of what things are. I mean, the
Wow.
majority of the people that I've met that are transgender and have transitioned or are going into that process, most of them were sexually molested or just completely raped, either once in their life or many times in their life.
Wow.
And on top of that, if you're gaslit for those things, oh, that never happened. I've heard that more times than I can even count, that they shared, oh yes, I was molested or I was raped, and everybody in my family gaslit me. So this goes into Richard
Wow.
Swartz's book, No Bad Parts, which I haven't dove into the book completely, but I have digested quite a bit of his work. And from what I get from it so far is that when parts of us go so unacknowledged and suppressed and really just torn down by the people around us, it does put us into a psychosis a lot of the times, which makes sense leading into them feeling as if they aren't a man or they aren't a woman because they've experienced these wildly traumatic things and they didn't have a powerful tribe to reflect that pain back to them in a loving way and validate them for what they experienced.
Mike, drop.
I appreciate it, brother.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot there. A lot there. I too have heard similar things from, various people that I've met that are transgender or desire to be or express, in opposite sexuality. Oftentimes, though, that's not what shows up on the surface is deep trauma, right? And then I've also met people where they just feel more connected with a different energy. And I couldn't sniff out any sort of traces of trauma there.
I'd love to touch on that.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Can you double click on that? Like, what's your vantage point? Because we obviously have different physical hardware, right? But yet spiritually, somebody could feel like I'm in the wrong body. Like I was born into the wrong body. And I imagine that would be traumatizing in and of itself and consistently traumatizing.
Absolutely. So the first thing that I bring up when this vantage point is brought up in conversation is her name is Dr. Shanna Swan. She was on Joe Rogan and she has a book called Countdown, where she goes in depth talking about how endocrine disruptors, especially phthalates in our food supply and water supply, are actually shrinking the taint size of boys that are being born. And essentially what that means for the people that don't have a current grasp of that part of the biology in the body, a woman's taint is usually extremely short and a man's is usually a couple inches. So what that is it's correlated with lower testosterone levels and lower masculinity in the body. And from everything that she shared, that within one generation, that can be completely reversed. So let's say, my son was born with half the taint size I was, but he decided to dial it in and find out what caused the small taint size, which, I mean, how many human beings are actually going to stumble upon that if it's hidden, right? If it's, oh, plastic is fine for us and all these things are pushed. Well, you're probably not, right? So that's where I bring up, this has been going on for a long time. Even aluminum cans have a plastic interior. I saw scientists dissolve a can in an acid, and the liquid is held by a plastic sack inside the can. So even aluminum, right, has plastic inside so it doesn't rust, right? And then, or taint whatever the liquid is in there. And then you've got things such as cardboard boxes. Oh, okay, it's water and cardboard. Well, no, cardboard would deteriorate if there was that much liquid on it. So they have to put a usually plastic coating on the inside of that cardboard to make sure that it doesn't destroy it, right? So it's not really any bodily safe more it's not any safer for the body than, aluminum would be. So with all that being said, the the point of feeling, just like I'm in the wrong body, right? And not having any excessive trauma and having a normal life, although I don't think many people actually know what a normal life is because so many people have grown up in childhoods that look normal to the average person. Oh, they weren't raped, they weren't molested, they didn't have these things happen to them, but they were gaslit their entire childhood, and they were raised by narcissistic parents that had no handle over their own emotions, which manipulated them into thinking that they were the problem, they were wrong, and that their parents never made mistakes, which from at least my perspective could definitely have some influences on getting into a psychosis, right? And like, oh God, okay, wow, I've always done something wrong, and I've always been the person doing everything wrong. Like, okay, wow, like I guess I have to take responsibility for all of this. And an experience that a lot of people have with narcissists is beginning to feel like they are crazy, right? That it's an extremely common thing. So I say all that to just touch on how much we don't know about people's lives that say, oh, I just feel like, I'm a man, right? But I was born in a female's body. Well, there's so many different factors. There's severe chronic trauma, such as the rape, molestation. There is the trauma that's coming from narcissistic parents that are gaslighting them their entire life and not showing them any love at all and completely neglecting and abandoning them emotionally. And then there are chemicals that are completely disrupting our biology to the point where we're not producing the hormones that our DNA is set up to produce because we don't have the nutrition and we've got toxins that are preventing it.
Oh my goodness, brother. Wow. Okay. So the narcissism tendency, right, which would just be a self-interested lens, sounds like emotional immaturity. So when I hear you bringing it back to the beginning of the conversation around controlling one's emotions, I feel like maybe another word that could work for me feels more accurate is commanding, right?
Great.
Listening, but
Yes.
like I'm in the driver's seat. Cool. I'm
Yes.
feeling this. I'm feeling triggered. I'm feeling like somebody is personally attacking me in this situation. However, I understand that as the commander, I can actually view the entire ship and say,
Boom.
okay, there's some energy that's in flux over here. This instrument is, going off the charts. It's an instrument, it's information. But as the commander, I still decide what to do. And so a narcissistic tendency would be I live in a reaction mode. Something happens to me, I react back. Boom.
Yes.
Eye for an
Absolutely.
eye. And yet, between every stimulus, there's always a space. In that space, I can choose to respond. And when I'm
Yes.
response able, I have the ability to respond, and I choose response consciously. The only choice that there is one that is the most loving in that moment for whatever it is that is showing up.
Beautifully said, Tyler. And going to the word command, I mean, perfectly said. And that it definitely aligns with the intention of exactly what you said. It's, being in the driver's seat and not controlling as if you're controlling or hurting an animal, but more so driving a school bus and all of the children are your thoughts and you're guiding them, right? But they're going to be bouncing around and jumping around, right?
Driving a school bus and the children are our thoughts. Dude, you are brilliant.
Thank you, Tyler. Received and reflected infinitely, brother.
It's so true. It's so true, because what's the difference between, a child and an adult, right? Outside of just the regular paradigm, it's emotional. Is it intelligence? It's emotional regulation, emotional acuity, right? Depersonalizing things, being able to see a bigger vantage. I'm not just here for me and my own selfish interest, but I have my family, my friends, my community, my tribe, this whole globe, this whole universe that I can be generative towards.
Beautifully said. So, how do you integrate that philosophy into your life on the daily?
Right here, right meow. This is actually
Beautiful.
where the thesis of Freestyler's universe came from, because it's not universe, it's a U inverse. Shout out to Robert Edward Grant on that one, the U inverse.
Amazing.
Reframed everything, because I'm not seeing what exists out there. Sure, there's whatever exists, and we can talk about, Newtonian physics or quantum physics, right, for different framings of whatever this base reality is or vantage point. But the observer effect, my consciousness, right, your consciousness, and then the co-creative forces of that is what defines all interactions. And so the more that I zoom out of my own personal, when something affects me, it's just physical. Like Newtonian physics would say, I'm going to hit my knee right now, and then boom, it just reacts. But quantum, it's actually entanglements that can take place. And so you and I actually are having a conversation, right? And we're connected deeply. And so there's like telepathic linking that happens where it doesn't actually matter the words that you're utilizing or expressing right now. It's the energy, the frequency that is coming through, and it's instantaneous. So if one particle can shift in one spot in the U inverse and then, light years away shift at the same time, it's showing us that there's an objective truth that everything happens simultaneously. There is no time without a perceiver of
that.
time. This aspect and dimension of perspective lane, right? Having a body, having all of these senses to come in. So that's kind of my thesis, man, is how do I embody even greater presence, even greater awareness, even greater consciousness, even greater flow? That's the journey.
Okay. So beautifully said, brother. I love that. And I love you touching on there is no time without the observer of time. So with that being said, what are your thoughts and feelings on infinity? So, and what I mean by that is as if in time, there is an infinity amount of time behind us. There's an infinity of time in front of us moving forward. And there is no beginning or end back there. And there's no beginning or end out there. And then spatially, physically, there is no end or beginning going infinitely deep, and there's no end or beginning going infinitely outward, expanding. And what comes up for you with that, terminology, that breakdown with the infinity in consciousness?
Thank you for the question, brother. All right. So I call it the infinitude, right? And so within the infinitude, we have polarity at each extreme. So as soon as there's a split from oneness, it goes into duality. And it's not just here's positive and negative, but it's constantly flowing, right? But then at the center where there's the intersections is the sacred neutral point of view. Within that sacred neutral exists everything. And so infinity exists within sacred neutral, right? And so another way of framing it is that, have you heard, that we're all mirrors of each other, right? Reflections. To take it one step further, instead of thinking about it as you and me, and there's a reflection here, imagine I'm inside of a gyroscope, right? And around this gyroscope is a sphere of mirror. It's a mirror sphere, right? So I can angle and articulate any direction and see an infinite amount of reflections, right? So in the infinite now exists all that is from a limitless vantage point and perspective. And yet that center is always my consciousness, just like that center is your consciousness. So then we have limitless expressions and experiences of all that is. And by being and doing in all that is, we're expanding and expressing even more. This is the value of know thyself and desiring to be here right now and express our creativity, express our gifts. I mean, this is flowing through me. I'm not like in my physical mind right meow. It just feels great. So thank you, brother.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that. That was great. I love the gyroscope perspective on that. So when you hear somebody say like, oh, lost in the sauce, or they're getting caught up in a specific part of reality, what do you think is happening there that is different from that point of sacred neutral that
It's
you were talking
emotionally
about?
connected. And so if there's trauma that I'm staring at the same part of the mirror and my gyroscope, I'm wanting to move and have a different experience, and yet agitation. And so then that shows up as an emotional inconsistency because I'm not truly present in the cockpit, in the commander's chair of my consciousness. It's pulling me. And so then I'm focusing on it. And hey, I don't know about you, but I've been stuck and I get stuck. And it happens frequently. Yet what I find is, how do I find flow with whatever is? Because when I'm in flow with it, it means I'm in true acceptance. If I'm in true acceptance, then it's sacred neutral. This is the value, because sacred neutral is not triggered left and right. It doesn't exist within polarity. It transcends polarity.
Beautiful. I love that. So in layman's terms, Tyler, how would you say the average person can apply those concepts to their life to get through those sticking points more graciously?
Oh, I love your questions, bro. Wow.
Thank you.
That's step one. Take a deep breath. Step two, realizing what are thoughts of the physical mind, which is attached to the biological mechanism here, right? That can die. This thing can die. In fact, it's in perpetual deathing. Every cell inside of our body is transfiguring, going through birth, life, death, birth, life, death, birth, life, death. And yet, do the cells inside my liver know that they're making up a greater whole of a liver that's then serving a greater whole function within this physical vessel? In the same sense as, do I realize that this physical vessel, this Tyler that I am here, is impacting your life directly as I speak, and every single other aspect and element, period, in all of consciousness simultaneously, even if it's the most minor ripple effect? Each of our conscious choices or unconscious, other than conscious choices, everything affects everything. Might not be perceived on a physical level, but as I've come to know that on a soul and a heart level, it brings up different questions. Like when I'm walking in nature, did I just step on that ant? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kill you, but that's exactly what happened. Out of an unconscious, just autopilot, I'm just going on a walk. Right?
Yes.
So the more conscious that I become of, is this a thought of my physical mind that wants to protect this vessel that actually can perceive and experience loss, right? Or is this of the heart? So digital, analog, right? Connected to all, everything, instantaneously. So the heart is quantum and the mind is Newtonian.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. The everything affects everything that you said is great. And it seems like a constant cause and effect. So at this point in your life, if you had to give your best guess on what all of this is and what this human reality is, what this entire reality is, how would Tyler describe that?
Goodness.
Like, what is this? Like, if you had to give your best guess, you're like, maybe it's 5, right?
42.
What would you say? Oh, okay.
Shout out to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What is it? By definition, it feels undefinable.
Oh, like the eternal Tao, which is the eternal Tao
Bingo.
cannot be spoken.
Allness
Amazing.
is inclusive of allness. So how can all expand? Even that's a paradox, because expansion is a relationship of polarity.
Oh.
So it can't expand. But when I feel into that and I feel into the heart, right, and emotions, energy in motion, it's amazing that this connective organ that we have, it emits a field. We all feel each other instantaneously. So, this experience of reality that we get to have is actually, Preston spoke very elegantly to this in our podcast, where he drilled in and talked about the value of constraints. Right? And he says, I'm probably not going to be an NBA basketball player. Right? So what? This is the constraint that I've chosen on some level. Anyone can believe whatever they want, but I believe that there's conscious connection and relationship to everything, which means that at least a part of me chose to have this physical experience, to choose every single relationship dynamic that I've entered, all of the states of being, places I've experienced, right? Daughter being born, beautiful baby. Like, she chose to be born from her mom and I, right? And, everyone's entitled to believe whatever they want, but through that lens of choice and consciousness and desire to experience, express, and explore, just allows me to love even more.
Beautiful, brother. I absolutely love that. Oh, that was so cool. Amazing, man. That was a deep dive, and I love that, touching on the restraint aspect. And essentially what I'm getting and what I'm feeling from what you're saying is that this indescribable essence and existence that we are existing in is almost as if human beings are falling through infinity. And in that process, we have seemingly infinite choices that we can make on a daily basis, monthly basis, yearly, lifely basis, right? Because our life choices affect the other lives around us and after us in a tremendous way. You know, something as small as cutting off my finger or something like that, my grandchildren will remember me as never having my
Mm.
left ring finger, you know, which could wildly change their entire reality and, I mean, shift where they live on the planet and what they do with their life and how they perceive themselves. So I love that concept that you're bringing up of everything affects everything, because I absolutely agree with that. The concept of the butterfly effect seems like the most sensible thing that reality operates on, a massive quantum cause and effect algorithm, essentially,
Causing.
with self-generation.
Go ahead. Causing
Yes,
an effect
yes.
algorithm.
With yes, a causing and effect algorithm. I love that. And that touches on what I was just about to say, is we are also self-generating entities that put things out, just like going back to using the terminology commanding, you know, my thoughts, driving that school bus, and the thoughts being the children. It is by choice. If I choose, you know what, despite these circumstances of everybody I'm around not embodying their most authentic selves and not bringing the deepest level of love to the planet that's possible, I can choose to do that for me, and most importantly, for the world. And this goes into a concept that I have, and it's essentially that we are extremely important to ourselves, and that serving ourselves and providing to ourselves is extremely important. However, you are more valuable to everybody else around you than
Mm.
you are to yourself.
Oh. And by actualizing that, living through a lens of, I am definitely important, take care of thyself, right? However, I am just one little
Yes.
ant in this ant farm running around. And so how do I actually serve and show up? Presence, love, connection, gratitude, each and every interaction.
Authentically. Beautiful. What does authenticity mean to you?
Oh, buddy. I feel like your base definition was incredible. The way that you defined, it's a full flowing of expression. That's an inward and outward expression. Yeah. An unrestricted, unrestrained, love centered, right? Connective centered beingness.
And would you say that our inherent authenticity is the highest value that we can provide to this reality?
It feels like yes. And
And
the scariest, false evidence appearing real, right? The most fearful example is, if I'm fully loving of myself, that means I'm fully expressive of myself and fully connective with everyone else. everything else. And that is a magical place to be, to bzz, of beingness, right? To come from that resonation.
What I'm getting from that, Tyler, is that heaven is scarier than hell.
Will I am. Oh my goodness. Heaven is scarier than hell. Yep. Maybe not for everybody, but in my experience, absolutely.
The large majority.
Wow. You know, the framing, how dare I? Right? Bryant and I were just talking about this yesterday. I had a conversation with Eric, and it was, how dare I not?
Yes. Absolutely. I love that. How dare I not have faith that I am here for a divine purpose and that whatever created me has absolute control over me, how much it helps me, and what I know at any given moment, and that I am always perfectly held. How dare I not have that level of faith?
Perfectly held.
Boom.
That's masterful. And you know, the irony of it is the chrysalis is a holding. The butterflies.
Interesting.
They didn't start out looking like this.
Yes. And it's uncomfortable to be in that shell for that long.
Yeah. So what if we're potentially chrysalising in this experience?
Yes, I love that you're touching on this.
We're touching on this.
Oh, so what comes up for me in that is something that I've thought of many times before, and it's that everybody has literally infinite value to provide to this world and to all humans. However, in the current state of things, most people won't do that, right? But everybody has the highest level of value to provide to the world. Everybody has the same amount of infinite value to provide to the world. However, most people won't do that.
Why? Yes.
Why will they not do that? Themselves. They are too... They hold too many egotistical insecurities to realize that the value that they have to provide to the world is more important than their own life. For example, do you want to be somebody or do you want to do something?
The somebody, I think, is where people get tripped up. Whether it's being or doing.
I agree.
But the most perplexing one is being. It's too simple.
Am I not somebody right now? Am I not somebody by expressing who I really am to the world, regardless of whether people respond negatively or positively? Because at least when I'm expressing myself authentically, I know who doesn't like me and I know who loves me.
And that's just a spectrum of polarity. So if I'm living in polarity, I'm not in sacred newt, which means I'm not in flow. I'm attaching to one of the sways. Oh, but they like me. Oh, but they don't. And versus what you're saying, divine expression is pure beingness, unattached to any of that. That's what unattachment is practically, is being neutral, right? And neutral can be joyous. It can be any type of expression on that scale of consciousness, right? To one, neutrality might mean peace. to me, neutrality can actually be excitement, right? Because what's another description of that bandwidth is, well, anxiousness or nervousness. The other side of that same spectrum is excitement. And so when I find sacred neutrality and spike in energy, I'd link excitement with flow. Let's go.
Amazing. I love that. The sacred neutrality. So what's coming up for me with that is a pendulum. And there's a pendulum hanging, and this little ball down here is me. The perceiver, you through the camera, is the world, human beings perceiving me. And if I push that ball towards you, I'm pushing myself onto the world. I'm implanting myself on the world, right? And then if I'm pulling, I'm reclusing and I'm hiding myself from the world, right? But both of them are quote unquote negative in the sense of they're both either trying to get a reaction or trying to hide from a reaction, right? But that sacred neutral sitting in the middle is I am going to be who I am fully in every moment and not focus on how people perceive me, if people like me or not, and how I'm perceived by the world. Yes, moving forward with a deep, loving intention and being highly aware of when I am emotionally triggered. But in general, moving through the world as me, and I'm not pushing it on anybody. And I'm also not hiding who I am from people, because people deserve my authenticity and my authentic expression. And honestly, right, who am I to say that I get to hide myself from the world? Who am I to say that the world doesn't get to receive my authentic expression?
Well, you are the commander. So that's who you are. You can choose. Absolutely. Am I commanding my ship to be suppressed, right? Lacking expression leads to suppression and then ultimately depression.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Bro. This is the juice. I mean, this is a liberating conversation for me, brother. This is profound.
I love that for you, Tyler. That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it. Oh, man. I love that.
Yeah, bro. How do people get in touch with you?
William Stevens. So WILLIAMR Stevens, STEPHENS on Instagram. All one word, no dashes, no dots. That'll be
That's
my
what's
main
up.
place.
Anywhere else? Do we have a website home base yet? Where can they find your coaching offerings, your retreats? This man, let me tell you, if you're interested in changing your life, I mean, this is a great example right here in just this little 1 hour pocket. Wow. Could you imagine days with this dude and everybody that he assembles?
I've got quite a bit of bookings for early 2024. So I may be booked out by the time you get to this link, but the link to my coaching is on Instagram. It's going to be my link tree, and there will be a little button that says, "Are you ready?" Click that if you're ready, and we'll go from there.
I love it. Let's grow, baby.
Beautiful.
Let's grow. Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate you, listener. Tuning in with your heart wide open, allowing the brain to be flooded with new information from pure source energy as it flows through you and me so elegantly. Thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, ding that bell. Actually, on the share point, if you have one person that comes to your heart that's going to resonate deeply with this message, please share. It means so much to me and Will I Am. Please connect with him. You can find me at tylerthedrake.com. Of course, Freestylers Universe, baby. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait for our next show. Man, this has been absolutely incredible, brother. Thank you for being you.
My pleasure, Tyler. Received and reflected powerfully. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in, and I look forward to jumping on here soon again with Tyler.
Likewise.
Been a pleasure, brother.
Peace and love.